Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Forge Your Trail podcast. My name is Frank Rodriguez. I'm a coach with the Forge Your Trail program. Today we have as our guest Mr. Jeffrey Boles. Jeffrey, I'm going to ask you to please introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. Well, as you said, my name is Jeff Boles. I work here at the University of Oklahoma, have for the last 23 years. I'm the director for the Training and Research Center here, a sister department for the Center for Public Management here in the University Outreach College of Continuing Education. That's a mouthful.
Long title, yeah.
Yeah, lots of different words and acronyms in those titles. I get to watch over facilities and IT and finances for a lot of operations and projects that help people across Oklahoma.
Okay, that's excellent. So specifically today, though, we're going to be talking about technology and IT. Tell us a little bit about your IT background.
Sure. So for the first 17 years of my 23 here at OU, I was primarily an IT director for all the different functions for the different desktop systems, servers, environments, purchases. Before that, I worked in as a student employee at OU, getting my degrees at OU in computer science, English literature, where I was able to work with early media projects and technology projects for it. So really, I've probably got 25, 30 years of doing different IT projects, IT experience, IT areas for all the different venues of my career.
Oh. Did you happen to ever work with a guy named Robert Dougherty? Bob Dougherty?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have.
That's an old friend of mine. He and I worked together at CLS for almost 30 years.
Yep. I actually got to help CLS a couple of times with some file storage issues and stuff they had. So, yes, I had the privilege of getting to work with him.
Hey, Bob. Just gave you a shout out. So today we're going to be talking with Jeff about online privacy, online safety, and especially how it interacts with parenting. So, Jeff, how do you balance protecting your child's privacy with staying informed about their online activity?
So, I mean, it's a challenging area. That is the thing that is the coin of the realm, selling people's identities, selling people's information. There's nothing on the internet that is free. If it's free, it's because they're using your identity as sort of a source of funds or resources for them. So how do you find that right engagement? It's hard to get people to understand that things on the internet don't go away, that if something's posted out there, something's shared, it survives. It survives in one way or another. It is almost impossible to scrub or to get rid of it. So trying to make sure people understand that as a way of protecting their online activity. But the other side of that is so much of socialization and interaction for children now, it is in the digital domain. They don't sit on the phone and talk to each other verbally anymore. They're in Discord conversations. They're in Roblox groups. They're in various different chats, programs, interactions where that has become their sort of ecosystem, their connection to everyone. You run the risk of ostracizing your child if you cut them off from all of those technologies, especially as they reach older and older ages. But you also have to be very vigilant with communicating with them about what's safe to say, what's safe to share, and also have strong trust for them to communicate with you about things that make them feel uncomfortable. Like so many things with parenting, it's a balancing act, and it varies from child to child and situation to situation. But it is definitely a complex area.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So at what age do you think parents should start talking to their kids about online safety and digital footprints?
It's getting earlier and earlier. I think often people think that's not something they have to worry about as quickly, but more and more school systems, they have devices given to them. And while the school does have controls in place to try to protect kids when they're on those devices from the school, there are ways kids find things around it. Ways to do stuff on that school device that is not normally permissible by the school district, or using other people's devices other people have available to them. So they're going to find a way to find roles and places online. I would say, really, as they're getting past the age of 6, 7, and 8, it's important to start. Now, you start small. You don't go into every little detail with a 7-year-old as you would with a 12-year-old, but there is a beginning of understanding there's things you shouldn't be sharing about yourself. You should never be giving someone your home address, your full name, lots of details about yourself. And you also, again, have to ask, not just what did you do at school today, what did you talk to your friend about, but what did you do online today? What websites did you go to? What programs did you use? You have to ask and get involved. Even if you set up controls, and we'll talk about those more, I think, but even if you set up controls, try to watch it, it's all about communication. It's one of those things of, as a parent, like, I will be less upset with you if you tell me about the thing that happened, then I have to find about it some other way. Keep those avenues of communication open so you hear about what's going on. Because if your child has enough self-awareness to go, I don't know why, but something that happened online today made me feel a little uncomfortable, and you find out about it, then that helps so much. Then, oh, I'm going to lock everything down and try to control everything. And you can't. It's just impossible as new technologies and new things continually evolve. So that communication, that is the key for it.
Right.
But again, getting back to the age, I'd say a progressive step, starting with about 6 or 7 and working your way up through it. I think of the way like Scouting America, or what used to be Boy Scouts, as it was called, structure their sort of safe awareness. They have a little bit of it each year as kids get older. And I think there's a lot of programs out there you can look at to help you kind of get some guidance on what's age appropriate to talk to my son or daughter at this age.
Right, right. So what about someone who is like myself, a grandparent, or a parent who maybe is not very technologically savvy themselves? How do they go about finding out about these parental controls and making use of these parental controls?
So all of the big ones, whether it's Apple, whether it's Microsoft, PlayStation, any of the different sort of things that are normally either aimed at your child or your child's going to interface with, they have resources online that you can look for safe parenting, parenting controls. Microsoft, for example, has family tools that you can limit screen time, websites, activity, in a way that will move between different devices with your child, even from an Xbox to a Microsoft computer. Apple has screen time controls, protections, things you can put in place. And these cover sometimes content. They cover how much time. They cover, can they request more from you? Can they request to buy a program or an app? So you don't have to be an expert at it, but you start by looking at that, reading about it. Then there are resources you can reach out to. There's online parenting sites that give guidance on these things. Also, sometimes you can reach out and try to find perhaps someone in your own social network who is technology. There's a lot of people out there with kids who also maybe are a little bit more familiar with the technology, and they can provide some pointers or some help as well.
Right. And isn't that one of the problems, that the children often are more native with the technology than their parents or their grandparents? And so they actually sometimes figure out ways around the parental controls.
Yep. I've been in the car with my child and one of their friends, dropping them off after coming over and playing, having a play session. And that child very proudly told me how his parents had screen time controls on him, but he knew their password, he knew their code, and so he could just adjust them when he wanted to. So yes, it's always sort of trying to keep up with it. But that comes down to a lot of things with parenting. You have to have trust. You have to have communication. You have to lay boundaries. And sometimes things may not go the way you want, and you have to just sort of work through that as a parent. It's interesting. You talk about sort of the proficiencies of the youth. The one thing I will say, though, is they know how to use what's useful to them. When you move into some other realms of technology, maybe productivity, whether it's knowing how to like use PowerPoint, write a report, use Excel, create something that maybe is a work activity, you'll find interesting different levels. Concepts missing. I think of there's been a lot of discussion recently about youth coming into the workforce and having no idea of file folders or files, and the concept that those of us who've been working in the workplace for a long time are used to, because the sort of apps and things they use don't have those concepts. The metaphors have changed. So, there are some preconceptions you might have that they know how to do everything technology better than you. You could probably find some areas you may be more familiar with than them. That may give you a starting point for the conversation in some cases, but a lot of it comes back to trust, communication, and trying to have that traditional parental skills of building that relationship with your child.
So that's a great idea. Might just sit down with my grandkids and open a Microsoft suite and say, here's what this does and here's what this does. Fascinating. Are there any common myths about kids and technology that you think that should be debunked?
Well, that one I was mentioning, the one about the fact that they have skills for the things that they care about, the things that they actually like most. I think the other area I would say for it is there's this feeling that if my child is just playing on their device, that it's sort of like that's just sort of wasted time, or that's not socialization time. And the reality is, as I was saying earlier, they've shifted, they've morphed sort of that communication venue into so many other ways where they're actually interacting with people that they may never see any other time, but in that chat session, that play session, that creative activity. There's a gaming platform called Roblox, and all it is this sort of endless variety of different, simplistic in many cases, games that the kids can sort of jump between. And it's given them a way to sort of build them in an easy way for themselves. And I've seen a lot of like emergent storytelling, creativity, activity, open-minded sort of imaginative play where I've overheard like my son interacting with 8 or 9 other people, all sort of creating stories together. And so it's trying to find the value of it. It may not immediately look to you like, well, that's the same as playing with kids in the street. And there is value to the physical activity and meeting the neighbors, but there's these digital neighbors that they interact with. And so if you sort of just devalue that entirely, you don't realize that is an important part of sort of modern society and the way people intermix. It's not just who you meet physically, it's how you're meeting them digitally.
Right, right. So our children today can have friends or acquaintances from around the world, whereas when I was growing up, it was just the guy down the street.
True.
Pretty much.
One example for me, when I was probably 8 or 9, I had a friend move away. We wrote a few letters back and forth,
right?
But neither of us were super enamored of sort of writing endless letters to each other, and we grew apart. Rediscovered each other years and years later through social media. My son had a friend who moved out of state, and they were just playing yesterday. The kid has not lived in this state in a year and a half, and yet they're still interacting regularly in these sort of digital mediums. They're still keeping that relationship. And while they may not talk endlessly about how are you doing, they're still bonding, interacting, and talking in ways that are native to them.
Mm-hmm. So when I watch my grandchildren play Roblox, mostly, it's just confusing to me. I don't understand how they know where to move and do all those sorts of things. How does a parent actually exercise oversight if it's something like that when they don't really even understand what's going on?
Sure. So some of it's those fundamental lessons about things you don't share about yourself, things you don't say, that awareness of if somebody says something that makes you uncomfortable. The reality is they may hear somebody use language you don't want your child hearing, or they may act in a way that is rude or not something that you think is polite. So trying to find that balance so your child understands what to talk to you about and let you know. The other part is just listening to your child talk about it. This is something that matters to them. This is something that they're investing time and energy into. It is valuable to them. And so you asking questions, try not to be judgmental, but just trying to understand it. Give them a chance to tell you what did they do in their session, what game were they playing, what were the rules of it. Giving them an opportunity, you may understand 1/10 of it. But the fact that you're asking that question, you're going to learn a little bit. You're going to improve your knowledge of it a little bit, but it's going to make them feel like you care, which will make it more likely and more possible for them to tell you if anything uncomfortable, anything that you need to step in and deal with is occurring as well. So that again, that's that communication. Don't just ignore it because you don't fully understand it. Engage with it, try to understand it, ask questions about it. It may be difficult to relate to things you yourself played or did or whatnot, but the more you learn from your child, the more you communicate with them, the better that relationship will be.
Right, right. So technology changes at such a rapid pace. It's hard for many of us, especially us older people, to really keep up. How do you see technology changing over the next 5 or 10 years, and what impact is that going to have, especially on our children and our families?
Well, I mean, it's a real popular topic right now because there's so much concern over the amount of screen time, the amount of normal socialization that's not occurring, the sense of isolation. We've got generations that are growing up that are living constantly in this digital environment. All their schoolwork's done digitally, all their interactions are done digitally. So where does that leave us? Where does it go? We've got initiatives with the state and Oklahoma to try to limit any kind of extra screen time, any other extra devices that is not a school-approved device within the school zones. I think it'll be interesting because we'll get more and more evidence from sort of our medical professionals on like, okay, where do we think the guidance should be now? And so we may have to make some adjustments as society to figure out where we want it to be. It's not healthy for anyone to do something only that, right? Any monopoly of your time is bad. You need to have a balance in all things. And so trying to find that, I think it's not going anywhere. It is going to continue to be omnipresent. It's going to continue to be always around us all the time. And so trying to carve out both real world interactions in that difficult where everything is pushed so digitally, I think is still a value for families. But as far as a crystal ball, where it will be in 5 or 10 years, I think it will, the things we're worried about now, I think we're going to be more worried about. I think these things are going to continue to be trends. And I think we're going to see potentially maybe stronger guidance on what do we recommend for screen time at each age, where that's just more across the board, just to ensure we deal with sort of the negative aspects of it while also dealing with the realities that it occurs. The drastic thing of, hey, I don't think my child should have any screen time, that cuts them off from so much of the world, for better or worse, that we live in now.
Right.
So that's not the healthy choice, but also completely abdicating responsibility as a parent and just letting them do whatever they want. Well, that's not a safe choice either. So trying to navigate that, I think, will hopefully have more guidance in the years to come.
Okay. What, I didn't ask you, how many children do you have?
So I've got one child, son.
Okay.
He's 13.
Is there any piece of tech-related parenting advice that you wish maybe you would have had when he was younger?
So I think, like I said, the one thing, it's just from my own experience, we didn't have the sort of online communities when I was his age. And so there are many times when I would see him on his computer for 2-3 hours and think, well, I need to get him off of that. I need him to get him to do something else. He's not, it's not socialization. But as I watched and learned, I hear him talking and I realize how many people he's interacting with and talking to. And I'm actually seeing creative activity. And I think the sort of the thing I wish I'd known, there's such a line there between sort of passive and active activity. Your child could spend 5 hours doing nothing but watching YouTube. Your child could spend 5 hours interacting with 20 other people and, again, creating stories, having fun, playing together. So trying to find the balance between sort of the creative and the sort of passive static. And emphasizing that it's not sometimes just about screen time in general, it's what that screen time is involved with. What are you doing? What are you actually stimulating your brain in? What are you getting out of the activity? Yeah. The thing we used to be worried about generations ago is they're watching too much TV.
Right.
Sitting in front of the television all the time.
Right.
And that was a passive activity. And even if they were playing video games a couple generations ago, they're usually just playing it by themselves. But now they're talking, they're interacting, they're socializing. And in some cases, learning teamwork, learning how to work together, how to solve problems together. So there's trying to find those positives. So I think it's just a lot more complicated. And that's probably what if I could go back 5-6 years ago and sort of tell myself as my child was starting on some of these journeys, to look at the nuances in some of these things more. But it's just a process to learn and to see. And some of those opportunities change. Those things grow. There's things our kids can do now that didn't exist 3-4 years ago online.
Right.
So, I mean, as you said, the rapid rate of change, you have to just keep adapting to it.
I like what you're saying about how technology is creating a new way of creating communities and finding friends. Indeed, it's actually changing the way we adults communicate with each other. I hardly ever talk on the phone anymore if I can just do a text or an email, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a certain convenience that comes with that. Why do you think that people are so concerned still about their children having screen time or thinking that, screen time is all bad time?
Well, there's a nature with anything that gives you that dopamine fix, that feeling of enjoyment. The phones, computers, whatever, they're designed around enjoyment. It gives you a sense of pleasure to be able to interact with, to be able to use, and that can be addictive. And children have that neuroplasticity where they may not always be able to exert the good judgment control to stop or curb those things themselves. So as parents, that's one of our roles, right? To try to make sure they have balance in their life, that they have moderation of activities, any one thing exclusively, like I said before, is not a good thing. So I think also, again, there is that generational thing of, I didn't have that when I was that age, and so I don't understand that is how they communicate. If you cut them off, if you say, hey, you're 13, but I'm not going to let you have any screen time of any kind, and they're limited to only interacting, there aren't really people for them to call, because that's not how their other peers communicate. They communicate through all those different mediums. But you worry about the peer pressures that come from social media. You worry about the negatives that can happen from these other digital substrates. And so it all looks overwhelming when you look at it in sort of aggregate. But if you work into the sort of weeds of it with your child, you try to understand what they're doing, you build those communication paths so they can talk to you about things that are concerned, and you exert those parental controls, whether it's Microsoft controls or Apple controls or what have you, to try to have some good guidelines for how much time they're going to use those devices. Then you can find a happy balance for it, where they're still connected, they're still digital natives, they're still interacting with their peers, but it is not monopolizing their entire day.
Right. So then talk to us about what are some of the good things that come with technology, and how can technology help improve parenting?
Sure. So there's so many information resources that are available. In years past, you'd have to go to the bookstore, right, to try to find a book about this subject or that subject, and it was usually out of date the minute it was published, right?
Right.
So there are so many different forums, so many different resources. Some of them are from medical professionals, child specialists. Some of them are just from parents in the trenches trying to work these things out and figure them out themselves. There are so many things you can use as a parent to help you. And then from the socialization side, not everybody always had a best friend across the street or lived in a neighborhood where there were a lot of kids immediately available of the right age for the kid to socialize with. Some kids felt isolated because of that. Now they can have friends from all over the world, literally, and be able to interact with them, meet people, interact with people. And there's so many different ways to sort of facilitate that and make it easy. Now, the quality of the communication varies, and the activity they're doing may vary, but at some level, that is such a positive good to bring people together. It's just, if you do it in absence of everything else, then that can become isolating, because human beings by nature are social creatures.
Right.
And there is a need for face-to-face contact, interaction with real people as well. So that's, again, that balancing act. I think those are all positives from it. It can bring us together. It can give us so much more information. It can put things at our fingertips that we would never have had before. But like anything, it's a tool, and it can be misused. It can be dangerous if you don't use it properly.
So you've mentioned several times that the technology tools are used for socialization.
Mm-hmm.
If we deal with a lot of people who are on the lower socioeconomic status.
Sure.
A lot of their children don't have phones or don't have the technology. Is that putting them behind, those children? Is that a bad thing for them to not have access to the technology?
I mean, I think in some cases it can be a problem, definitely. There's school districts that provide devices, but they're limited and locked down for what can be used for them.
Right.
There is a sense of haves and have-nots. There is a sense of separation between people and what devices they have. It is challenging when your only interface to use something maybe is a phone, but it's designed to be used on a laptop or on a computer. There are barriers to entry that can come in there. In many cases, though, a lot of those technologies have become more democratizing. There's been a big push to sort of design things around sort of the lowest denominator device. There's a phone version of it as well as a computer version, or there are versions of it that can work on different devices on all different levels and stratum of technology. So I think, yes, there are barriers to entry that come into from like an economic stratification. On the other hand, I think that there are efforts with a lot of the technologies to try to break past those barriers and make them available.
Right. Thank you. Good answers. What are some effective strategies for setting boundaries around device usage with your children?
So it's starting early. It's harder to assert controls when problematic behaviors start than like starting it from just the beginning. So, the first time your child actually has a device, whether that's a cell phone, whether that's a laptop, making sure that there are some sort of screen controls in place for the beginning. Talking about that with your child, make them understand. And they'll get pressure back sometimes because they'll have friends who have none. They'll have friends who, like I was saying earlier, who have maybe subverted their parents' controls already. I have had a kid look me in the face and go, "Why does your kid have screen time controls? My parents don't give me any." That can be hard and challenging as a parent.
Yeah.
But it's something that if you set up initially, you understand as you start, and of course you can adapt and change as needed. That helps so much. So let's say like the child is getting a first Windows computer. They've got a computer they're using, reading the Microsoft parental stuff, setting up a Microsoft family account, adding your child as a member of that family, and setting up some controls in place so that is there. Because the nice thing about those systems is if a situation comes up where the child needs more screen time for whatever reason, they can do requests to you. It has not just the ability to have sort of lockdown and controls, but ways that you can get a request that you can then allow. Situations where maybe they're at school with their phone and they need an app, and you've got it locked down where they can't. I can get a little ping on my phone and say, yes, that's allowed, and then he's able to install it. Or he's over at a friend's house and his screen time is used up. I don't have to come to the house to fix it. I can click something and give him some additional time. So all of the ecosystems provide tools to do that. It's just for us to look at it and understand it, and they make it relatively easy. They have apps to control it. They have guidance on how to do it. They don't try to make those systems too arcane or too difficult, and there's a lot of support out there to be able to help you use it. So I would say that would be initial starting points to make sure you're effective. It's a lot harder to put locks on the cookie jar when they're later having trouble eating too many cookies. It's much better to talk about at the beginning. One cookie is enough for right now. And start off with that and then adjust as you need to.
I like the cookie analogy.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a 10-year-old granddaughter, and she's already, I got to have a phone. I want to have a phone. What advice do you have for parents who are considering what is the best age to allow their children to have some free technology of their own?
That's so hard. Every kid is different for their, there's so many factors to consider beyond just sort of safety and security. Are you going to have trouble with the child losing the device, breaking the device, letting someone else use the device? There's a whole host of issues to watch for there. So every child reaches sort of an emotional and sort of responsibility maturity at different ages. Whatever you do, there's going to be some kids in his class or her class who already have devices. And so you're going to hear, well, everyone else has one.
Right.
Why can't I? Right. So, that's a factor to look into as well. In our modern world, there's also some benefits to them having a device. So you have some logistical awareness, whether it's Apple's Find My or various third-party tools that you can use. So you can see where your child is at any given time. Know if they're where they're supposed to be. Are they at the school or at a friend's house or whatnot? So there's some value there for you as a parent once they have something that you can use to have some awareness of what's going on. I'd say it varies. I've seen situations where kids as young as 8 or 9 are getting their first device, a phone. Others hold off until 10, 11, 12. Definitely, I think, as you're getting close to probably the junior high age, you're entering into like 6th grade, that becomes much more common. But again, it's going to vary. It's going to vary from parent to parent, situation to situation. But I think, again, you start to see situations where instructors are posting stuff online. They're making things available. They're communicating. I remember, I think it was maybe in 6th grade, my son had a math teacher who was posting some things on TikTok. And to this day, my son's still not on TikTok, but it was one of those questions of, was this something we need? Is this something we need to get him set up and subscribe to? And so they're going to start having these things pop up. They may want to become a YouTuber. They're going to become an Instagram star. And you have to really have some serious conversations, not just about the device, but about the mediums. It gets into the nuance of it so much more. A phone is just a gateway, but what are you going to be comfortable with them using on it, interacting with it, and kind of subjecting themselves and by extension your family to as well.
Now, you said your son is 13, which is a tough age. What is it that you worry about with your own son and technology?
True. So as especially in the last year, he's been interacting more and more people online, wider audiences, in voice, in sort of storytelling in these different environments, role-playing online, chatting with people in Discord, communication tools, and just trying to make sure I don't know everybody he talks to. I don't know their true age. I don't know if there's someone in there who may want information they shouldn't be from him. And so that's a thing for me, is just continually checking in with him, asking, hey, anything make you uncomfortable today in your interactions online? Open-ended questions. Sometimes I just ask, tell me what happened. Often they will love to tell you in nuanced detail about all the crazy things they got up to. Maybe they won't tell you what they did at school that day, but they'll tell you what happened in that fun thing that they remember and was something they just did that they enjoy. And just trying to listen for anything that's a concern point and continually reinforcing those core baseline sort of safeguard values. You don't tell someone your address. You don't tell someone your full name. You don't tell someone your age. You don't tell someone information on how to contact you outside of this game. There's strangers and there's friends. If you're playing with someone that you go to school every day with, there's a certain level of safety there. If you're playing with someone that's across the country and we don't know anything about, there's a different level of safety. And trying to make sure those values are repeated often enough so they become inculcated into the way he plays and interacts with them. It's a challenge, but those are the things that I worry about as I see him interacting with more and more people. I'm glad to see him interacting, but I also always have that sense of vigilance and concern. You can't just look out the front door and see who he's playing with in the street when they're playing online.
That's right. Do you have any apps or games that you restrict?
So social media, we've kept him off of any kind of social media still, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, as I mentioned earlier, any of those. There's so much societal pressures. And some of these vary a little bit with whether you have a son or a daughter. There are whole different elements that get involved with that. I've only had the experience of having a son, but even with every gender, there is a whole element of baggage that comes with that and pressures that can really have negative impacts. We do allow him to view YouTube, and that's an area where you have to also watch as well. There are ideas presented out there that sometimes have toxic elements, especially for the youth in our country, that can have a corrosive impact on the way they view the world, view themselves. And so having to have discussions, the same way if you watch a challenging film together that you've deemed age appropriate and you want to talk about how did it make you feel and think, you need to engage and find out, are they watching things that are a concern? So like I said, social media in general is something that at least our family don't feel like we're ready yet for him to be engaging with. It's more of just more direct interactions and gaming areas, things like that.
This is the Forge Your Trail podcast, and our guest is Mr. Jeff Boles, who has many, many years of expertise and knowledge in information technology, and specifically how it interacts or has impact on parenting and parenting skills. Jeff, are there any topics or questions that we haven't covered that you think we should cover?
No, I think we've gone through quite a few, and I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much for joining us for this episode of Forge Your Trail podcast, and we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.